I think that story is yet to be told. There is a part of me that wishes I was more savvy in that world at that time that I would have considered it. However, be careful making a deal with the devil. And not saying all those investors are, but we've seen the ethos and the culture of companies change overnight as soon as there's a private equity firm that buys 60%, right? I will say there was a time the brands, especially the ones that were born in the CrossFit space with us, they started doing that and we didn't. And all of a sudden they have the budget to do big athlete deals and these big endorsements because they just got a giant check. The owners made a ton of money, but then a bunch of money went to the balance sheet and allowed them, all right, here's your 3 to 5 year growth plan. You're going to go be the title sponsor of this, and you're going to go to this, and you're going to launch this new. And man, did the family miss out on some financial liquidity in those moments? Absolutely. Would I probably have a different arrangement in my life right now had I pursued that? Yes. But what's the value in me being able to come in here in a pair of frayed jean shorts after some 5x5 bench at 10 o'clock and having no one say a goddamn word about where I've been, or if I got to leave at 4:30 to go get my daughter 30 minutes early because I want to take her to get ice cream, right? What's the value in that? What's the value in if we miss a target by 2% like we did this month, not having to get on the phone with a bunch of dudes in suits in New York City saying, hey, what happened in March, right? We're good. On to the next, you know what I mean? What is the value in that? And that's why when I speak at these entrepreneur things, I tell the fellas, like, be careful raising capital because just make no mistake, the second you do that, you don't own your company anymore. Even if, like, let's say you sold 49%, you know, which is honestly something we could do at some point, but I will be very specific on who the partner is. They might have more voting rights. And even if they don't, if someone cuts you a check for $30 million, guess what? They get to bug you on a Saturday night. You're going to pick that damn phone up, right? So don't be under any illusions that, I'm still the boss man. Like, they kind of own you. And now you're going to have to deal with that for the next 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. So it's just, what are you willing to sacrifice to have that freedom and autonomy and, when things got crazy with the culture in the United States, a lot of that money was influencing like how brands were projecting themselves and, for things like going super woke. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, you have to have gender pronouns in your email signature, all these like stupid things that it's because you got people from New York City or San Francisco really running your company. You have to do, you know what I mean? And like, imagine if that had happened here where I got to like put my tail between my legs and come into a meeting, like, all right, guys, like, we're going to be doing things a little differently moving forward. Like, first day with the private equity firm, like, these are the new policies. And they look at me like, what the hell happened to Born Primitive? I'm out of here. Right. So I guess it depends on, how you look at it. One thing that does bring me a little bit of satisfaction and maybe a little smirk is a lot of these brands, there's one of them, and I'll even call it out, like a brand like Noble. I think they've raised now over $100 million in capital. Guess what, man? We're toe to toe with those guys. Imagine if you gave us $100 million and you said, deploy that into marketing, what we could do. With how the lethality we have with what we do here and where that would get deployed to and how efficient it would be because we had to cut our teeth in the most competitive way. We were going, now was there a big surge for them when they did all that? And did it make them a mainstream brand way quicker than us? 100%. But we were like the little engine that could, man. You know what I mean? You look at our sales trajectory, $100,000 year one, $256 year two. Then it was 1.2. Then 2.5, then 10, then 20, then 35. You know what I mean? And I'll leave it at that. I'll let you guys, right? That was our trajectory where some of these brands went 20 to 80. And then because, they just spent $20 million on marketing that year. Of course, so their top line grew, but they weren't even profitable at the bottom line. But there was a window of time where you didn't have to be profitable to get huge investments. They were using a multiple of your revenue, not a multiple of your profit, right? And then all these predictions started falling apart of these brands that it wasn't working out anymore for all the things we discussed. And all these, investors all of a sudden said, oh shit, we actually need to invest in businesses that actually know how to make money. Well, we made money from the beginning because that's the only way to survive when you're self-funding it, right? We couldn't go lose $8 million in 1 year and then be like, well, we grew top line by 60%, so we're good losing that much. You know what I mean? Because we didn't have the funding. So I'm glad we did it the way we did it because it forced us to be scrappy as fuck and have good habits, although it wasn't always the right tactics, but we had to learn the hard way and then adjust. Where it was when you have that backstop or that safety net of we have $12 million in our checking account, you can make some stupid decisions and still kind of get away with it. You know what I mean? You can go sign that big brand partnership that you think is going to raise all this awareness, and it doesn't really pan out, but top line went up. So like, we're good. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. I think if I were to start a business again and it'd be completely different, I probably would raise a capital a lot sooner, but I would do it in a way knowing what I'm getting myself into, and there would be deliberate intent. But I'd be like, okay, the purpose of this is to create financial liquidity for myself, and I'm willing to sacrifice ownership to achieve that. So
does that the on the PE side of things, like what we went through with the Allbirds and some of these bigger brands where they were just getting insane evaluations, even Uber, some of there were a ton of them that happened then. Does that come and go in waves? Because to me, it's and I'm sure you could find the answer to this pretty quickly, but like why? Because now it has flopped, as you said. Now it's what's your EBITDA? Like we don't give a shit about top line. We want to know the money, the cash flow of the company is sustainable and is strong. How did that happen in that time period? Is that something just people like PE firms are trying to like kind of gauge the market, and sometimes their risk tolerance is higher and they're willing to kind of go off more of a growth strategy, and then other times it's like no, you need to have your EBITDA needs to be in a really strong position. Do you know kind of how that pulls back over decades? Is that something that just kind of ebbs and flows, depend like their strategy there?
Well, I think it's probably reactionary to kind of like doing it the wrong way. So like there was a window of time where a private equity firm could invest in a company and they say, all right, we're going to grow the top line revenue at all costs. We don't give a shit about bottom line. And in 3 years, we're turning around and we're selling this to the next idiot who's willing to believe that top line is the only thing that matters, right? And they were making a ton of money with that approach, but that window closed quickly. And it was almost like overnight, they all realized top line doesn't matter anymore. We have to focus to the bottom line. However, a lot of these companies that were funded by these PE firms were not set up to produce bottom line profit because they were a machine to go top line at all costs. You look at like Manscaped. I think I was looking at their financials at one point. They're doing like, fact check me on it, it's probably way off. They're doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, but then they were losing like 20 million a year. Normal Joe Schmo like me would look at that and be like, why would I invest this? You guys just lost 20 million when everyone's like, oh, this is the next, you know what I mean? Because they're pumping millions and millions, they're signing with the UFC, they're doing this. You think they're killing it, but when you look at the financials, like this is a terrible business. So eventually the gig's going to be up. And you're not going to be able to sell to the next idiot who's under the illusion that top line. Eventually, you have to show you can make money. And once the dynamic changed, these companies were in a very difficult position because you now have to retool the entire organization to now, hey guys, let's not worry about top line anymore. The bottom line is the only thing that matters. And if we have to go down 20% in revenue year over year, but our profits go up 40%, that's the new standard. But it's like for those companies, like steering a cruise ship, right? Especially when there's a bunch of institutional capital already invested in the business. And that's when CEOs get fired and private equity guys bring in their own CEO and they bring in their own team to kind of salvage it because now they have to fire sale their equity to just move on with the investment. And that's pretty much what happened. But that puts us in a really unique position because we are tooled for bottom line only, right? Like that's because we have to be to survive. Hopefully I don't have to put another lien on a house to fund the business. You know, see what I'm saying? Whereas if, we had been wired $20 million and said, hey, go do good things, we probably would get a little loose. You know what I mean? We'd still try to stay disciplined, but hey, inevitably you'd sign a few more endorsements. You'd do a few more things. We'd have the Gucciest snacks in the snack room, like
for sure.
A few stupid examples. You see what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So I think it sets us up in a unique way. And even more importantly, the ethos of our company has not changed, right? So when we go, and I believe that consistency over time has given us an advantage amongst our competitors because when things got a little wild in our country, Born Primitive was as advertised. We did not waver a fucking inch, even when it wasn't popular. There was a time when donating to a charity that supports the families of fallen law enforcement officers was getting me hate mail, getting me DMs that were insane. Guess what? Did we bend a knee to those people when every other fucking brand did? No, we didn't. We kindly told them to fuck off, and we said, this is who we are, and if you're against law enforcement, you're entitled to that opinion, but that's not the official ethos of this company. You know what I mean? And now that's a little bit more mainstream. And I'm happy to say, I think we were on the right side of that one, even though it was still super stressful, because when it's, when there's more people involved and there's employees and you have all these people relying on you, that does rattle you a little bit of, man, should we kind of modify our stance and play the business game a little bit so this thing doesn't, come crumbling down. And, in the moment you don't have, the vision to know it's going to be fine and just stick to your guns, because that was kind of the first time we really got hit with that dilemma of like, do we need to become all these other corporate brands where, the buzzwords and, kind of going in any direction the corporate winds happen to be blowing that day. But now we're in a unique position because it is family owned, that we want to have those hard stances. And when we want to come on this podcast and talk about the election and no one's telling us what to do, and we can be authentic. Right. And I think that makes us, that's a kind of asymmetric advantage we have against the big brands, that it's like, one, you're steering a cruise ship, and two, you can't take a stance like I can because you have some guy in New York telling you what to do. And that's pretty cool.